Yes. So, welcome everyone. Good afternoon and thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Dr. Amit Borse and I'm marketing head with Medico Marketing Department of IVA, a division of Emcure Pharmaceuticals Limited. Emcure is a pioneer in the field of gynecology and IVF. And IVA is on a mission to nurture and support 28 days. Programming 28 is a scientific theme for the year, and it is based on the concept of managing an ovarian cycle with different analogs, hormones, and gonadotropins as per different protocol. Materna is a prime brand and epitome of quality. We are very thankful to Dr. Manjujila ma'am for allowing us to host this event again and again. We call it Dr. Manjujila's Masterclass. The series has been going on very well and we have already completed 6 topics, which you can see on the invitation with their YouTube recording links. These recordings are available on IVF Virtual Academy, IVA, on a YouTube platform. Today, ma'am is again going to speak on thin endometrium and a very important topic in IVF. Thank you, ma'am, and all over to you.
Thank you. Today we are going to discuss a very challenging topic which we all face almost every day. Whether we are treating patients in the IUI cycle or IVF, we often get this problem of a thin endometrium. Now, a thin endometrium, really should we worry about it? What should be our strategy in managing a patient of thin endometrium when we are doing an IUI or when we are using clomiphene citrate or when we are doing IVF? Because not all thin endometrium patients would fail to conceive. Literature shows that even women with a 6 millimeter of endometrium or a 5 millimeter of endometrium shows implantation. If we try to think, we know that embryos implant even in the fallopian tube where the lining is not even 2 to 3 millimeters thick. So what is this condition? Why, when the endometrium is less than 7 millimeters, pregnancy rates fall? And when it is between 8 to 12 millimeters, we get a very good or a optimum pregnancy rate. We have to know a little more about it to make decisions whether when we are doing IVF, whether we should freeze the embryos. If we are doing a simple IUI, should we cancel this IUI? So let us go into the depth of this topic to understand. Of course, as on today, not the entire knowledge is available. And even if it is available, it is not available for us and our patients. So we have to make certain intelligent decisions from the knowledge that we have. So let's come to the point, that is thin endometrium. Before we go to thin endometrium, let us understand the physiology of the endometrium. Endometrium
can you make your slides full screen?
Yes, of course. 1 minute. Yeah. Just a minute. Yeah.
That's fine.
Now, endometrium is a completely hormone dependent and hormone responsive tissue. We know that a young girl who does not have estrogen, her endometrium never grows. A menopausal woman whose ovaries have become quiet, their endometrium never grows, they go into amenorrhea. But in the reproductive cycle, as ovulation occurs, estrogen is produced followed by progesterone, and it is this estrogen-progesterone cycle that acts on the endometrium. So estrogen, now this endometrium comprises of a basal layer and a functional layer. It is the functional layer that grows and sheds in response to estrogen and progesterone in every menstrual cycle. But the basal layer remains as it is. This basal layer contains the stem cells, which keep growing after every menstrual cycle. Implantation of the embryo, placentation, and nourishing the fetus is the chief job of the endometrium. And so what does estrogen do? Our talk about thin endometrium is to understand the effect of estrogen on the endometrium. Unless this effect occurs on the is not prepared for implantation. So under effect of estrogen, the endometrium undergoes proliferation. We know that estrogen is a steroid hormone having two types of receptors. These receptors are inside the cytoplasm of the cells. So in the endometrium, the cells have got estrogen receptor alpha. So estrogen along with estrogen receptor alpha form a complex, get inside the nucleus and get attached to different promoter sites of the genes, various genes. And the main cells that start growing from the basal endometrium are the endometrial epithelium. The ones which invaginate inside are the glandular epithelial cells, then the vascular endothelial cells, and the stromal cells. So estrogen with its estrogen receptor alpha acts like a transcription factor and promotes various gene activity, bringing about rapid mitosis and production of a large number of glycoproteins, cytokines, chemokines, progesterone receptors, which is a very important job of estrogen, growth factors. So in this period of 10 to 14 days, the basal endometrium produces the functional endometrium, which measures around 8 to 12 millimeters in size. And at this level, when the endometrium is around 10 to 11 millimeters thick, there are a lot of progesterone receptors produced by the estrogen receptor complex in the stromal cells especially. And this activity of estrogen is extremely important so that progesterone can produce the required changes of implantation. So I just said that estrogen acts through its estrogen receptor alpha. There is another estrogen receptor called as estrogen receptor beta, but this is not very active inside the endometrium. What it does, it acts on many genes, causes mitosis, production of glycoproteins, cytokines, chemokines, progesterone receptors, growth factors, and in all the cells, uterine epithelial cells, glandular epithelial cells, vascular endothelial cells. Estrogen activity for these days, for this 8 to 10 days, causes the growth of endometrium to 10 to 12 millimeters. I've just repeated what I said because this is extremely important. Because does this happen in a thin endometrium or not is our question. Now, what does progesterone do? After production of all these effects of estrogen, the follicle ruptures and progesterone production starts. Progesterone acts only and only on the estrogen primed endometrium because it is estrogen that causes production of progesterone receptors. Again, in progesterone, there are two types of receptors, A and B, which are also inside the cytoplasm. And in the endometrium, it is the progesterone receptor B, which is active. And it is extremely active in the stromal cells, in the glandular cells, and in the epithelial and the vascular endothelial cells. Now, what does progesterone with its receptor do? It enters the nucleus and now it produces certain changes. It stops the production of estrogen receptor alpha. So estrogen activity is suppressed by progesterone. It makes the glands secretory, not proliferative anymore. And it also leads to production of many types of proteins, peptides, integrins, cytokines. All these, the number of molecules you listen to about implantation and implantation failure. So these are the important implantation molecules produced by progesterone in an estrogen primed endometrium. Not only that, we know that there are certain cytokines which attract different type of immune cells, the plasma cells, the leukocytes, the lymphocytes, the monocytes. So there are two types of immune cells, those producing antibodies and those producing killer cells. So the antibody producing cells are increased or attracted by the cytokines produced by a progesterone primed endometrium. So that is called as a Th2 type of immune modulation. In short, under effect of in the estrogen primed endometrium, when progesterone acts for 5 to 6 days, there is an upregulation of 238 genes which are required for implantation. And this is what the ERA test is. ERA test is nothing but checking the mRNA of the endometrial tissue on day 3, day 5, day 7 to see when all these 238 genes have been upregulated. Because once they are upregulated, that is the time when implantation will occur. For successful implantation, we require a high quality embryo, a good endometrium, and a perfect embryo transfer technique. Receptive endometrium is defined as a healthy uterine milieu, transforming the endometrial cells into decidual cells, which are appropriate for implantation. Now, what is decidual tissue? It is nothing but compaction of the stromal cells, which produce all the implantation factors. Now, what could be the reason of a thin endometrium? See, we know that endometrium grows with the help of estrogen and progesterone. We also know that for this estrogen and progesterone to reach the endometrium, we need a good blood supply to the basal endometrium. We also know that the basal endometrium should have enough stem cells in order to regrow the endometrium. So there should be estrogen, there should be a good vascular supply, and there should be enough of basal cells, stem cells in the basal layer of endometrium for the endometrium to grow adequately. So if a woman undergoes a polypectomy, a hysteroscopic myomectomy, or a prolonged use of clomiphene citrate, the endometrium may become thin, or if there is some uterine abnormality in itself, they may have lesser basal cells, and therefore they may have a thin endometrium. Now, it is often seen that there is decreased angiogenesis in women who have a thin endometrium. Because ultrasound is easily available, a lot of radiological studies have been done in women with thin endometrium, and it is always seen that they have a little resistant flow in their radial arteries, in their uterine arteries, and therefore there is because of this resistant flow, there is a reduction in production of VEGF, that is vascular endothelial growth factor, and angiogenesis. This is what has been stated in many of the studies, but this is not the sole reason of a thin endometrium. Now, what should be the ideal thickness of endometrium? Even this is not perfect or not defined as on today. Some say it should be more than 8 millimeters, but many studies have taken 7 millimeters as a cutoff point. And they say that in less than 7 millimeters, neither IUI nor IVF pregnancies would be very successful. That is, the percentage of pregnancies falls from in IVF from 40 to, it falls to almost 10%. So because the cause of a thin endometrium is multifactorial, that is, the amount of estrogen in the body may be less because of a suppressed hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis, or that is, we see in hyperprolactinemia, we see in extreme stress. We also see that even if clomiphene citrate stimulates the HPO axis, it acts as an anti-estrogen at the endometrium, making the endometrium thin. It could be because of an advanced maternal age where there is increased resistance to flow of blood through the uterine and the radial arteries. It could be in women who have had endometrial infections like tuberculosis, endometritis, curettage for a missed abortion where the estrogen levels fall and then a curettage is done, which leads to a lot of destruction of the basal endometrium. Or maybe it could also be because certain genetic factors are there in some women where they do not have the proper genes for the growth factors or proper genes for the receptors, which we do not know today, or maybe one of those 238 genes are lacking in these or altered in these women, and they continue to have a thin endometrium. So the causes could be one is decrease in estrogen production because of suppression of the HPO axis, decrease in the blood flow to the endometrium because of resistance in the radial arteries, destruction of the basal endometrium, partial or complete because of infection, curettage, prolonged use of oral contraceptive pills, and clomiphene citrate, or could be due to some genetic factors because of which estrogen and its receptor cannot act on the DNA of the cells in the endometrium. Now, acute or chronic infection, and in our country, we must always think of genital tuberculosis in women who have a non-responding thin endometrium, and a hysteroscopy or PCR to recognize the presence of tubercle bacilli is an important test, not in the Western world, but definitely in our continent. So, should we worry about a thin endometrium, and when we should worry and when we should not worry about a thin endometrium? Now, overall, it is seen that uh, pregnancy rates come to a, lower and lower part as the endometrium goes on decreasing less than 7 millimeters. That is, at 7 millimeters, pregnancy rate falls by 15 to 20%. Less than 7, it further falls, and by 4 millimeters, you hardly get any pregnancies. So there is something to worry. A letter was written to Fertility Sterility by an author called Kambak ES in 2009, and he said that this thin endometrium could be because of reduced blood flow to the endometrium, because of which there is low growth of the glands, there is low VEGF, and many times this high impedance flow in the radial arteries could be because of advanced age in the women. So that should be considered in women with thin endometrium. What do we see on histopathology when the endometrium is thin? So this is the status of the glands at late follicular phase in a normal endometrium, and we see much lesser concentration of the glands in the thin endometrium women. So this is the basal endometrium. We can see it over here, the basal endometrium. This is the functional endometrium which sheds. And these are the blood, the radial vessels and the spiral arterioles. And a resistance is found in these radial vessels, because of which these stem cells do not grow as they should. It is also seen that there is a high impedance flow and poor growth of endometrium in all the phases of a thin endometrium. That is, even in the early phase, that is soon after menstruation, also radial artery resistance is high in these women. Late follicular phase also the radial artery resistance is high, and mid-luteal also the radial artery resistance is high, as seen on Color Doctor. Now, how do we measure the endometrium? This is simple. All of us are doing it every day. And what we should see is this is a typical trilaminar endometrium seen when the follicle is nice and ripe. And we have to take the outer diameter and the largest diameter. That is near just about 1 centimeter below the fundus, and take a sagittal section where you can see the cervix, the internal os, and then the fundus of the uterus. Keep the bladder empty and have a look on any uterine waves, because the uterine undergoes a lot of, myometrium undergoes a lot of contractions at high level of estrogens. And if you just measure it or freeze it at the stage of contraction, you will get 1 or 2 millimeters lesser endometrium than when you see it in a state of relaxation. So there can be variation, time to time variation, observer variation, the user variation, machine variation. All this should be considered. And if you have a color Doppler, put the Doppler and see whether this is the zone 1 of the endometrium. Just below, or the subendometrial tissue is called the zone 1. This is the zone 2 and this is the zone 3. So if there is good blood flow in zone 1, we should be happy. If there is good blood flow in zone 2, that is over here, implantation is much higher, and if in zone 3 it is the highest. So this blood supply by power Doppler should be checked if you have the facility to do so. So this is the menstrual endometrium. What we are checking? We are checking from the basal, that is from the myometrium, end of the myometrium to the upper part of the endometrium. This is what we are seeing on transvaginal ultrasound. Now, we may have very thick endometrium up to 15-16 millimeters, normal up to 12-13 millimeters, or a thin endometrium of 6 to 7 mm on the day of follicular rupture or day of human chorionic gonadotrophin. So these are the Noyle's criteria to check the endometrium: mid-secretory, early secretory, late secretory, proliferative, and menstrual phase of endometrium. Now, when we get a thin endometrium, what should we do for these patients? How do we pinpoint the cause of this thin endometrium? First is, we can pinpoint from her endocrine evaluation. What are her ovarian reserves that we can see? Serum prolactin, which suppresses the hypothalamo-pituitary axis in many of these stressed infertile women, should be looked for. Then, if that is normal, estrogen levels are good, ovarian reserves are very good, then maybe we can just do a Doppler and see the resistance to the radial arteries and the uterine arteries. If all that appears normal, and if you see an irregular endometrium, then of course you should go for a hysteroscopy. Supple endometrial infections like white patches, tubercles, flimsy adhesions, red patches can often be seen on hysteroscopy, which can never be seen on even a best transvaginal ultrasound. So in that, we can take a biopsy and find out what is the reason. And mostly we should rule out tuberculosis in a case of thin endometrium. Also, uterine anomaly, women with uterine anomalies often present with thin endometrium, like a unicornuate uterus, a bicornuate uterus. They may have a thin endometrium. So how do we manage the thin endometrium? Of course, if we are very methodical and we pinpoint the cause, our management strategy would be much better. But very often we are unable to pinpoint the cause. Just for all those who are using clomiphene citrate in their IUI cycles, if around the time of ovulation, if you have a 17 to 18 millimeter size of follicle and only a 6 mm or 5 mm size of endometrium, always add estradiol valerate, at least 8 milligram, oral or vaginal, and you will see by the time the follicle ruptures, the endometrium becomes at least 9 to 10 millimeters. And that is how you can rescue this clomiphene citrate cycle and give the patient a pregnancy. Continue this estrogen till the pregnancy test in a clomiphene citrate cycle. For those who are doing IVF, one has to think about this thin endometrium. Now, when we are doing IVF, we may either stimulate the ovaries. Of course, in those patients, there is a lot of estrogen because many follicles are growing. Depending on the number of follicles, definitely more than 1, 2, 3 follicles are going to produce adequate estrogen for the growth of endometrium. And the other group of patients are those who are undergoing a frozen embryo transfer or taking donor eggs or donor embryos, where we are not bothered about the ovaries, but we only want the endometrium to grow. Now, this endometrium can grow in the natural cycle, that is by the growing follicle. Whatever estrogen is being produced by the growing follicle, the endometrium can grow because it's her own estrogen which is continuously being produced by the ovary. Or we can give estrogen from outside. So that estrogen can be given from the second, third day of the cycle for 10 to 12 days. When we are giving this estrogen, many times the estrogen suppresses FSH and ovulation doesn't occur. And many times we can go on increasing the number of days and the dose of estrogen till we get an adequate endometrial thickness. So after giving we'll just decide or think that after giving a lot of estrogen or seeing in a natural cycle, doing a hysteroscopy, everything is normal. Her estrogen levels are normal, but still her endometrium is not responding. Or it is thin, it is 6 mm, 5 mm, it is not growing beyond that. Then we are forced to use certain drugs to improve the thickness of the endometrium. And these drugs we can divide into 3 types or 4 types. So first is the growth factors. And in the growth factors, the most important factor that grows the endometrium is estrogen. And then we can use the other growth factors like the GCSF, then platelet-rich plasma, human chorionic gonadotrophins. Then the other group of drugs is those which increase the blood flow to the uterus. They are like sildenafil, vitamin E, L-arginine. Then the third group is the stem cells. Now, we know that stem cells come from the bone marrow and go in all the organs of our body. I think it is our bone marrow that allows us to live for 100 years. This is because the bone marrow continuously supplies stem cells to our brain, our heart, our various vital organs, which regenerate with the help of these stem cells. And of course, a group of drugs, that is antibiotics and anti-cox therapy when we find tuberculosis in the endometrium. So now let us look at estrogen. The mainstay of increasing the endometrial thickness, we use estrogens. Now estrogen is a molecule which is available in different forms: estriol, estrone, and estradiol. We know that estrone is present in older women, and estriol is the main estrogen produced by the placenta. Estradiol is the main estrogen that acts on the endometrium in the reproductive age group, that is produced by the ovaries. Now we have natural estrogens also coming from plant sources like soya and yam, but we also have synthetic estrogens like estradiol, which come in various forms like ethinyl estradiol, estradiol valerate, estradiol hemihydrate. So the advantage of this is they are nicely or completely absorbed orally, but when they go into the liver, they are destroyed by the first bypass, and almost a good amount of this estrogen is bound to the serum albumin, and very little free estradiol, although a very, very potent molecule, is available for its action on the endometrium. So let us see about the synthetic estradiols. So these are synthetic estrogens which exist as ethinyl estradiol, estradiol valerate, estradiol hemihydrate, and so on. Half-life is around 15 hours. Absorbed by all the routes, that is, you can give it transdermal, intravaginal, intramuscular, or oral. It is destroyed in the liver and bound to albumin, and very little free estrogen is available when we give the estrogen orally. Can be given in a dose of up to 28 milligrams, and it can be given from 8 to 80 days in women with thin endometrium. One should remember there is toxicity to liver and a risk of DVT in women taking estrogen. Those who fail to respond by oral estrogens, we can give transvaginal, transdermal, or intramuscular preparations, getting excellent results on the endometrium unless there is decreased vascularity or destruction of the basal endometrial cells. So now let us look at the other growth factors like HCG, GCSF, and PRP. So in the modern days, a few years back, everybody was talking about GCSF. What is GCSF? It is a natural human glycoprotein containing 174 to 177 amino acids. It is produced in the bone marrow. It stimulates the production of neutrophilic basal cells or stem cells. It has been used in to increase the production of stem cells in ischemic heart disease, or in brain ischemia, or in suppression of bone marrow due to chemotherapy or radiotherapy. But its use in a thin endometrium is off-label. And what we are doing in our patients who have a thin endometrium on day 7 or day 8 is giving a 30 ml dose intrauterine of 300 micrograms of filgrastim or GCSF. In my opinion, if it is acting on the stem cells, giving it when the endometrium is just going to, start its progestational activity or on the day of HCG would be a wrong way of using GCSF. I think GCSF should be used immediately after menstruation, so that it really stimulates the stem cells and more start differentiating into epithelial cells or glandular cells or stromal cells or the vascular endothelial cells, so that the endometrium starts growing. So maybe we should do more studies and find out whether GCSF can be used immediately post menstruation or after a scratch post hysteroscopy. So the study which was done, there are a lot of studies, but one 2014 study showed that subject with endometrium less than 7 mm received GCSF intrauterine on the day of HCG, and they found a little increase in the thickness after 72 hours. We do not know, was it the time which increased the endometrial thickness or the GCSF? Now, GCSF is one of the growth factors, but there are, whenever there is an injury in the human body, a living human being will always heal. And how does healing occur? Healing occurs because the platelets break and they release a lot of growth factors like transforming growth factor beta, fibroblast growth factor, insulin-like growth factor, epidermal growth factor, then vascular endothelial growth factor, and so on. So, this is given. So that is why we thought, instead of giving only GCSF, which it is one of the growth factors, why not give a platelet-rich plasma on the day 7 or day 8 of the endometrial growth, or on the day of HCG, in order to promote the growth of endometrium. Again, I feel that this platelet-rich plasma, if we have to give for stimulating the stem cells, it should be given early in menstruation rather than giving it late. And we need such studies which will tell us whether this is effective or not. The studies now available show that there is a variation in the results. Some say that there is a good result, some say there is no result with platelet-rich plasma in increasing the thickness of endometrium. Some of the studies show that 150 IU of human chorionic gonadotropin is given from the 8th day of cycle till the day of starting progesterone. That is at least for 6 to 7 days, 150 IU is given daily, and the small studies show 1 to 2 millimeter increase in the endometrial thickness. Now, the drugs used for increasing the blood flow to the uterus, they are sildenafil, vitamin E, L-arginine, nitroglycerin patches, ASA. A small study shows that ASA in 28 oocyte recipients with less than 8 mm endometrial thickness did not show any difference in the pregnancy and implantation rate. So ASA is not very helpful. Sildenafil, what is this drug? It is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, and it increases the cyclic GMP level, which again helps in the nitric oxide donor cycle, causing vasodilatation. Actually introduced for erectile dysfunction. Lot of vasodilatation in erectile dysfunction and corrects erectile dysfunction. And so it was thought, why not use it to increase the blood flow to the uterus? And therefore, we are using it off-label, 25 milligrams 6 hourly, orally or vaginally, to see if there is any improvement in the blood flow and therefore in the thickness of the endometrium. And it is given throughout the follicular phase. Well, now we come to stem cell therapy. First, it was thought that the endometrium has its own stem cells in the basal layer. But one of the discoveries which were made in the past few years was some women got bone marrow transplant for aplastic anemia. And when they had menorrhagia, the DNC in these patients showed XY cells. So they went back and saw, oh, the bone marrow transplant was of a male donor. And so the cells from the bone marrow have reached the endometrium. That means the bone marrow is supplying stem cells to the basal endometrium. This was proved. Then it was shown that these are CD. CD is a marker on the cell surface. These are CD138 cells, and they are present in the bone marrow. So what was done by certain group of doctors, I think they have done it in Spain. What they did is they took the bone marrow, they stimulated or they cultured, they caused, supposing they took 100 CD138 cells, they put growth factors into it and they kept it in the incubators and they grew it to 1 lakh, 10 lakh cells. And then in a cath lab, puncturing the femoral artery, going to the uterine artery, they injected it into the radial artery so that these 138 CD138 basal stem cells of the endometrium reach the basal endometrium and start growing. And in the first few patients, they saw very promising results. Some of them conceived naturally, some of them conceived with IVF embryo transfer. And so this has become a promising treatment for those women who have a destroyed basal endometrium, maybe destruction because of radio, chemotherapy, or infections, or a very bad curettage. So this probably could be a very specific therapy in such women. Now, ERA test. Is there any role of ERA test in a thin endometrium? I said that the embryo can implant even when the endometrium is 6 mm, 7 mm in a small percentage of patients. So what is the mechanism? We know that for implantation to occur, it is not the thickness of endometrium. If it was thickness of endometrium, we would never get an ectopic pregnancy. So it is something else. And what is that something else? It is the implantation molecules and it is the immune response in the endometrium that allows the blastocyst to implant. And for this, these implantation molecules and for this immune response, the ERA test checks the upregulation of 138 genes. Now, how do you see the activity of any gene? Activity of a gene is seen from mRNA. We know that the DNA transcribes the mRNA and mRNA comes outside on the endoplasmic reticulum and starts producing proteins. So when we take a DNC sample, say on the 5th day of progesterone or 3rd day of progesterone, what they do is they separate the mRNA, make the cDNA, and check for these 138 genes which are responsible for production of all the chemokines, cytokines, growth factors which are required for implantation. And if they are available, definitely the embryo will implant. If they are not available or a few are absent, embryo may not implant. So if we are consistently getting a thin endometrium and the woman says, whatever happens, you transfer my embryos in my uterus only, we can help her with this test. And if her 138 genes are upregulated on either day 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, of progesterone, then we can safely transfer. If not, we can tell her that her transfer is going to fail and we should not transfer these, the embryos in her uterus and go in for a surrogacy instead. So in conclusion, thin endometrium has many reasons: low estrogen, depressed HPO axis, severe stress in a woman, hyperprolactinemia could be the endocrine factors, resistant blood flow to the uterus could be age related, hypertension related, stress related, or innate because of some uterine abnormalities. Then destruction of the basal endometrium is the worst of all, with the which is most resistant to any type of treatment that we are doing. And because we cannot pinpoint, we try to mix everything and give. We give higher doses of estrogen. We give growth factors other than estrogen like GCSF, PRP, HCG. And we give those drugs which increase the blood flow to the uterus like sildenafil, vitamin E, then L-arginine. The estrogen is the main growth hormone of the endometrium. And if a woman fails to respond to estrogen, then all these other modalities are not going to work. And if oral estrogen doesn't work, it is better to give her either intramuscular estrogen every 3rd day. I think it is given in the dose of 10 milligram every 3rd day, or a vaginal estrogen, either vaginal gels or even tablets can be given vaginally, or transdermal patches can be given. So, and if we see resistant flow, vasodilators may have a role. Yeah, I think that should be all. If there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your elaborate presentation. Yes, there are questions in the chat box. If you
Right,
allow, I'll just read it on with the doctor's name.
right.
So the first question is from Dr. Shilpa Abhyankar. She's
Hmm.
saying, what dose of EV, maybe estradiol valerate, do you
Hmm.
recommend for post-curettage thin endometrium when you add progesterone?
Well, see, there is no fixed dose. It is the physiological response that you see. And I told you that oral estrogens, you may need a higher dose when you give it orally because although it gets 100% absorbed, much of it is destroyed in the liver. Almost 80 to 90% of the estrogen that we give orally is destroyed in the liver, and the remaining gets absorbed, gets attached to albumin, which is not free estrogen. And what is active is the free estrogen. So if she is not responding to oral estrogen, you go on increasing. You start with 2 milligram, make it 4 milligram, 6 milligram, 8 milligram. You can give it till 80, 82 days. But if you see no response, then you can go for vaginal or intramuscular estrogens. And if again that is not working, then definitely your curettage has damaged her stem cells. She does not have the required stem cells to grow her endometrium.
Great. Thank you. I hope this answers your question, Dr. Shilpa Abhyankar. If you require, you can put down a chat box message. We can unmute you as well. Ma'am, the second question comes from Dr. Jyoti Bandi. She's saying, how long is an ERA test reproducible?
Uh, what do you mean reproducible? It is reproducible
Achha. So,
because you never do ERA test in the same cycle when you are going to transfer the embryos. You do it one cycle earlier. And then you say, okay, her genes are getting upregulated on day 4, not on day 5. So, and then that is reproducible.
that is reproducible.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there's another question from Dr. Jyoti Bandi. She's saying, ma'am, should we use the same HRT protocol that was used for ERA in the ET cycle, and why?
Absolutely, because the same HRT cycle, only then you will get or you will be able to duplicate that ERA. Exactly same you have to use. You cannot make changes in that.
Great, great. There's another question from Dr. Neha. What's the cutoff of endometrium for embryo transfer in patients with thin endometrium or anti-tuberculin drugs?
See, this is a question which is very unanswered. And some people say 7 millimeters, some people say 8 millimeters. But 8 millimeters should be a safe cutoff.
Okay. 8 millimeters should be a safe cutoff.
Safe cutoff. And I'm saying on the day of HCG, not on the day of embryo transfer.
The day of HCG. Okay. Okay. Understood, ma'am. Thank you very much. Ma'am, there are other couple of questions as well. Dr. Swati Mohobia, she's asking a question. Is down regulation can be a cause of thin endometrium? How can we overcome it?
See, what is down regulation? In the first part, we use a GnRH agonist, right? When we do down regulation on the 22nd day. And GnRH agonist causes a flow of FSH LH from the pituitary. And that acts on the corpus luteum. And corpus luteum produces more of estrogen progesterone. It becomes sort of like a cyst. So down regulation in the first cycle should not be a reason of thin endometrium. But in a case of endometriosis where you keep on down regulating for a very long time, it may be one of the reasons for thin endometrium, and you may require more estrogen to stimulate this endometrium.
Okay, great. Thank you, ma'am. In the meantime, Dr. Meeta Bilagi, ma'am, is saying, congratulations, Dr. Manju, ma'am. Wonderful deliberation as usual.
Thank you.
Ma'am, there are other questions. One again from Dr. Neha. She's asking, can we use Dufaston 10 mg, one tablet BD dose instead of injection progesterone or progesterone support?
Look, Dufaston is it is that D isomer, L isomer of the natural progesterone. It can be taken orally. It has got special affinity for the endometrial tissue. So it does, if they have done ERA tests and they have found that Dufaston almost produces the same changes like the natural pure progesterone in oil. And therefore you can use Dufaston, but in a dose of 10 milligram TDS instead of pure progesterone in oil.
Okay, understood. So 10 milligram TDS.
Yeah.
There's another question from Dr. Neha. Is there any role of empirical AKT if histopath is normal in persistent thin endometrium?
Well, see, one has to show the presence of the tubercle DNA or tuberculosis DNA in order to give anticox, because anticox has its own side effects. We have seen patient landing into severe hepatitis and even dying because of hepatocellular failure because of anticox treatment. And so when you are doing a hysterolaparoscopy, one should be extremely vigilant in collecting the sample from where you are seeing something suspicious, not just doing a general DNC. That is one thing. Even when you are doing a laparoscopy, you see tubercles, you write down tubercle seen. Then why don't we just take a small tubercle, see if it is on the uterus, even if it is on the tube, you take the small tubercle and send that for a PCR. Because in PCR, even if it is a very small amount of DNA, it gets amplified and we do get a result. The whole problem why PCR doesn't come positive is because we do not give them or supply them with the correct sample. As far as possible, if you still feel that no, I'm sure this is tuberculosis, you can always send the patient under physician's guidance and then start with anticox treatment.
Great, thank you. Ma'am, Dr. Sapna Chauhan is asking, ma'am, dose of estradiol valerate and from which day it's to be started?
Estradiol valerate has to be started from second day of cycle. Now see, there can be, if you are seeing a patient, you want to transfer in a natural cycle. That time what we do, we just start with a follicular study, look at the follicle, look at the endometrium. So for a 14 mm follicle, you should get a 6-7 mm endometrium. For a 18 mm follicle, you should get a 9-10 mm endometrium. If that is not happening, maybe she is stressed or whatever, prolactin is high or whatever is happening, then you can add estrogen at that time also. Or in a clomiphene citrate IUI cycle. When you see a thin endometrium, immediately you can add estradiol valerate.
Okay. Dr. Sapna Chauhan, ma'am, have immediately said in an IUI cycle? How
yes, in an IUI cycle, when you start doing the follicular study, and if you see a thin endometrium, then it is better to add estrogen.
Okay, okay. Ma'am, there are another questions. With your permission, should I continue?
Yeah, no work. Go ahead.
Ma'am, Dr. Neha is asking, persistent thin endometrium, if responds and grows till 8 to 8.5 mm, but loses the trilaminar pattern and becomes diffuse or hyperestrogenic, can we proceed?
Yes, the pattern is never important. Never important. Only if the pattern changes, just do a serum progesterone. If that is high, then don't transfer. If that is low, then you can go for a transfer.
Okay. And the same question almost, Dr. Swati Mohobia is saying, if we are not getting a trilaminar endometrium and endo is ecogenic, how to proceed?
If the endo is ecogenic, one is there can be infection. Second, progesterone levels must have increased. In both the cases, we should not transfer. If you do a serum progesterone, if that is normal, better to do a hysteroscopy, rule out any infection, and then only proceed.
Okay. Ma'am, Dr. Neha has again continued her question. Clear trilaminar endometrium of 9 mm, if shrinks with progesterone to 7.5 to 8 mm, is it advisable to proceed for embryo transfer?
Yes.
Yes.
Progesterone causes compaction of the stromal cells just below the epithelium. And many times, actually, contraction of the endometrium with progesterone gives better pregnancies than the thickening of endometrium with progesterone.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. A new point. Ma'am, there is one question from Dr. Sandesh Sankhe. He is saying how you will go for natural cycle ET in PCOS cycle. Maybe PCOS.
Well, PCOS don't have a natural cycle. You may give letrozole and see how in natural cycle, you are actually following ovulation. PCOS are not ovulating. So you can give letrozole and go on following the follicle. And if it is not rupturing, you can give HCG. Let it rupture, and then after HCG day 7, you do an embryo transfer.
Great, great. So, ma'am, that is all from questions section. We can take another minute. If anybody has any question, please put it into chat box. For a minute, we can wait for that.
I am open. You all can give me a call if you have any problems.
Dr. Neha again.
35 years of experience can be given to everyone.
Absolutely. Ma'am, Dr. Neetan Hegde is saying, thank you, ma'am. Dr. Neha has extended her question. For fresh transfers, endometrial thickness on day of trigger, 7.7 mm. Serum progesterone.
Which fresh transfer?
For fresh transfers, endometrial thickness on day of trigger is 7.7 mm.
Okay.
Serum progesterone normal. Is it advisable to add 8 mg estrogen after pickup for 5 days?
See what happens. If you want to add estrogen, start before pickup. Because the day you give HCG, within 36 hours, the follicles are going to rupture and progesterone production will start. Progesterone reduces the estrogen receptors and your estrogen is not going to function. So when you are seeing the patients before rupture, that is when they come on the 7th day, 6th day, if that time you see that, oh, there are 5-6 follicles this side, 4-5 follicles on the other side, and the endometrium is only 6 millimeters, you can add estrogen at that time itself. Because as it is, you are stimulating the ovaries with external FSH. That will be more effective.
Right. Another question from Dr. Swati Mahobia. Sunil, in the meantime, Dr. Sapna Chauhan ma'am is asking for ma'am's number. So just message her in the chat box if you can see. Dr. Sapna Chauhan.
Dr. Amit. And maybe possible for you make a co-host to others, might be possible, so they can directly interact if you have the time.
If they put a message. Ma'am, last question from Dr. Swati Mahobia. Do you do day 2 LH? Is it of use? What lab parameters in a IVF cycle?
Day 2 LH, no, I don't do. Lab parameters are absolutely nothing we do. We use antagonist cycles. We do a transvaginal ultrasound on day 2 and we start with FSH. The only lab parameter that we do, the endocrine parameter that we do, is a serum progesterone on the day of HCG. We don't even do estradiol levels or anything. We just follow by ultrasound.
Okay. Sapna Chauhan ma'am has asked a question. In case of normal cycles, if endometrium is anyhow prepared by sildenafil or estradiol, shall we continue estradiol after IUI or rupture of follicle?
Of course. You have to continue.
Okay.
Because suddenly if you decrease the endometrium, whenever estrogen progesterone levels decrease, the endometrium starts shedding.
Okay. Until how long, ma'am?
You have to continue till you get a positive pregnancy test and maybe for 7 days more. Of course, if it is a clomiphene citrate cycle, there is no need because clomiphene citrate is like a support to corpus luteum. But if it is a HMG cycle, then you have to continue that estrogen till the patient's pregnancy test comes positive and 7 days till after that.
Okay. Dr. Neha ma'am has asked a question. Does this mean day 9, 12 and 15 intrauterine?
What? I didn't get the question. Hello?
Ma'am, there's an
audible, Sunil?
Yeah.
So just we ask the questions from you.
Sunil, am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Amit, carry on.
Hello?
Amit, your network is not there, I think.
Can you hear me?
Sunil, now am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the question. Sunil, can you read the question for Dr. Neha? There are two questions.
Ma'am, Dr. Neha is asking, is there any role of tamoxifen in endo preparation?
See, tamoxifen, roloxifene, clomiphene, these are all SERMs, selective estrogen receptor modulators. I told you that estrogen acts through its receptor, estrogen receptor alpha. And clomiphene acts through estrogen receptor beta. That is why clomiphene suppresses endometrium and tamoxifen causes proliferation or even polypoidal endometrium. In order to increase the activity of the receptor, tamoxifen can act.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. And then another questions asking from Dr. Sapna Chauhan. She is asking, in case of normal cycle, if endo is anyhow prepared by sildenafil and estradiol, shall we continue estradiol after IUI or rupture of follicle?
I told you, we finished this question. Yes, you have to till pregnancy test and 7 days after that.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. So there is no more question over here.
Yeah, chalo. Good. Should we end?
Thanks a lot.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a very nice presentation, madam. You elaborate well about this thin endometrium. Every doctor, they appreciate it. And definitely nearby future, we conduct more session with you so that we enjoy your experience of last 35 years. So definitely and many more.
You can
and
give
we
my
had
number
some,
to your young budding gynecologists. I can always help them.
and ma'am, just one thing I like to ask the many doctors from the field, those who are doing this as a gynae practice, they are facing an issue with the thin endometrium. Even
Yes.
if estradiol, valrate or sildenafil, both the drugs, they're not giving any response. Even chances here they are getting 5 to 6 mm thin endometrium would be there. So can we use GCSF on that cycle actually in a normal cycle?
So they have used clomiphene citrate for stimulation or not?
Yes, they started with clomiphene citrate.
So that clomiphene is the reason of the thin endometrium. First, use higher doses of estrogens. And I think that will solve the problem.
Okay, madam.
Yeah.
But somehow still the patient, those who are not responded, then can we go with GCSF?
No, so change the route of estrogen. See, the best growth factor for endometrium is estrogen. All others are younger brother in action and higher elder brother in price.
Yes. Thank you, madam. Even in the market, the many problems in here like hemihydrate, some companies they are promoting. We had a estradiol valrate only. So have we found any big difference between hemihydrate or estradiol valrate?
No, the main action, it is not this, the other part. It is the estradiol which is active. Whether it is ethinyl estradiol, hemihydrate, estradiol, valerate, it is the estradiol which is the most important molecule which acts.
So there is no basic difference in between both the drugs.
Not much. It is actually the difference is because of the route by which we give it. And an injectable is a need of the hour. We had injectable earlier, but now I don't know. Some anti-cancer people are using it for prostate cancer, and off-label we may use it.
Thank you, madam. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you, madam.
Okay.
Great session as always.
And for the next session, we connect soon, madam. On 14th,
Yes.
we'll do.
Yes, definitely. Right.
Ma'am, thank you very much. I lost my connectivity in between, but from MCure IVA division, thank you as usual. You have been fantastic and very nice question and answer session which has happened.
Right. I thank all of you all for making this interactive in this COVID. We are meeting people from far different places without much effort, sitting at home and having lovely discussions. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You are most welcome, ma'am. Thank you.
Right.
Dr. Geeta Sevgan ma'am has just started a video. Ma'am, do you want to? Acha, just no problem. Okay. So before we go, participants, please be informed that this will be available on IVF Virtual Academy in next 24 to 48 hours, the recording, and we'll share it with you. Before we go, I would like to share a small video on a scientific theme for the year, Programming 28.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. See you soon.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.